You know, there are moments in American political life that stop you cold. Not because something violent happened, not because there was some constitutional crisis with sirens going off, but because a line got crossed so quietly, so casually, that most people almost missed it. And what happened on August 5th, 2026, at the Red Rock Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada, that was one of those moments. Now, the President of the United States went to Las Vegas to talk about the economy. That was the stated purpose. He was there to sell voters on his economic record, the no tax on tips provision, the tax relief initiative, ahead of the November midterms. And look, that's fair game. That's what presidents do during midterm season. You go out, you make your case, you rally your people. I did it. Every president does it. But what happened inside that 75-minute speech went somewhere very different. Because instead of staying on the economy, which, by the way, with interest rates where they are, with a housing shortage, with gas prices pushed up by the Iran situation, instead of staying on the thing his own voters needed to hear about, Donald Trump spent several minutes attacking a man who had just won a Democratic Senate primary in Michigan. And the way he attacked him, the words he chose, the tone he used, the accusations he made, that's what we need to talk about tonight. Because this wasn't just campaign rhetoric. This was something else entirely. And we'll come back to exactly what he said in a moment, because the details matter more than you might think. Now let me give you some context, because who this man is matters. The person Donald Trump attacked is Abdul El-Sayed. He's 41 years old. He was born and raised in Michigan, Detroit specifically, the son of Egyptian immigrants. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa with highest distinction from the University of Michigan. He won a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, where he earned a doctorate in public health. He completed his medical degree at Columbia University. He has over 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications. He ran the Detroit Health Department. He was on the front lines during the Flint water crisis. And I'll tell you something personal. I was at the University of Michigan commencement in 2007 when Abdul El-Sayed gave the student address. I was the main speaker that day, and after listening to that young man talk about what Michigan meant to him, about the person he'd become because of that university, I told the audience, and I meant every word of it, I wished every person in the world who believes we're fated to have a clash of civilizations could have heard him speak. That was almost 20 years ago. And now this same man, this Rhodes Scholar, this physician, this public servant, just won the Michigan Democratic Senate primary, defeating Representative Haley Stevens by about 15,000 votes out of nearly 1.5 million cast. He'd be the first Muslim ever elected to the United States Senate. And within hours of that victory, the President of the United States called him, from a casino stage in another state, a communist, a man of hate, and worse. Here's what Donald Trump actually said. And I want you to hear this clearly, because the specific language tells you everything about what's really going on. Trump said, and I'm paraphrasing closely from the transcript, "This guy hates Jews." Somebody said, "Oh, that's a little strong." No, he hates Jews and he hates Israel. Abdul El-Sayed, he's a man of hate. He called him full of, well, I won't repeat the profanity, but you've probably seen it. He sarcastically called him a lovely gentleman. He said El-Sayed was a communist. He said, and this is the part that really got to me, he hates them with a passion that burns in his heart, and there's not a frickin' thing he can do about it. Now, what is El-Sayed's actual position? He said he opposes unconditional military aid to any country, including Israel. He wants that money directed toward health care and schools and roads in Michigan. He's explicitly stated on CNN, on the record, my commitment to Jewish safety is the same commitment I have to the safety of my own daughters. You can agree or disagree with his policy views on foreign aid. That's legitimate. But what the president did was not a policy disagreement. He took a policy position and turned it into an accusation of hatred rooted in identity. And that is a fundamentally different thing. Now, I want to be fair here, because fairness matters even when the other side isn't being fair. And let me tell you something. I care about the people who watch this. And I care about you having the full picture, not just the piece that confirms what you already believe. If you're someone who takes being informed seriously, and I know you are, then what you're getting from cable coverage on this is not enough. They gave this story maybe 3 minutes. They showed the clip, they had two people yell at each other about it, and they moved on. But the real details, the timeline, the specific policy positions, what El-Sayed has actually said versus what he's been accused of saying, what this means for the Michigan general election. The Blue Bill newsletter had all of it, with the kind of depth cable simply cannot fit into a segment. 5 minutes a day, and you'd have the full picture on this. Go check the Blue Bill newsletter, because what I'm telling you right now is that you deserve better than what cable is giving you on a story this important. Now, back to the fairness point. There are legitimate concerns about some of El-Sayed's associations. He was endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. He was backed by Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The political commentator Hassan Piker was connected to his campaign, and Piker has made statements in the past that were deeply offensive. Those are fair things to scrutinize. If Republicans want to argue that El-Sayed's policy positions are too far left for Michigan, that Medicare for all is unrealistic, that ending military aid to Israel is strategically unwise, those are legitimate debates. I'd engage in those debates myself, and I might even agree with some of those criticisms. But that is not what Donald Trump did. What Trump did was skip every legitimate argument and go straight to calling a Muslim American a hate monger because of his faith-adjacent identity. He didn't critique the policy, he attacked the person. And that tells you this was never about Israel or foreign aid or economic philosophy. This was about finding a target and making him into a symbol. And here's where we need to think about what this does to the country. Because when the President of the United States stands at a podium and tells a cheering crowd that a Muslim American doctor, a man born in Detroit, a Rhodes Scholar, a public health expert, hates Jews with a burning passion in his heart, that doesn't just affect one Senate race. That sends a message to every Muslim American, every Arab American, every person of Middle Eastern descent who has ever thought about running for office, serving on a school board, joining a city council. The message is, if you disagree with us on one policy issue, we will define you by your religion and call you a hate monger. And let me tell you, from 8 years in the White House, from decades of working on Middle East peace, from sitting across the table from Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat and King Hussein, the idea that criticizing the policies of a foreign government automatically means you hate an entire group of people is not just wrong, it's dangerous. It shuts down the very kind of debate that democracies need to function. You can be deeply committed to Jewish safety and still believe that American tax dollars should be spent differently. Those two things are not contradictions, they're democracy. Now, let's talk about why Trump is doing this. Because the political strategy here is not complicated. It's actually quite transparent. And it tells you something about where we are headed into November. Trump and the Republicans have been watching the Democratic primaries very carefully. In the last several weeks, progressive candidates, Democratic socialists in some cases, have won primary after primary against establishment Democrats. El-Sayed beat Haley Stevens. In Michigan's 13th district, Donovan McKinney beat Sri Tanadar. In Wisconsin, Francesca Hong won. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party is having a real moment. And the Republican strategy is simple. Paint every one of these candidates as a radical, a communist, someone outside the American mainstream. And you're not going to find this kind of strategic breakdown on any cable network. They don't have the time or the inclination to dig into what's actually happening underneath the surface. The Blue Bill newsletter had this with details you didn't even know existed. The margin numbers, the endorsement maps, the state-by-state pattern of where progressives are winning and what it means for November. The people reading it right now are not caught off guard by any of this. If you want to stay ahead of what's happening in this country, that's where to go. Now, the reason Trump singled out El-Sayed specifically, and not just the progressive movement generally, is because El-Sayed is the most visible target. He'd be the first Muslim senator. He's running in Michigan, which is one of the 2 or 3 most important states for control of the Senate. And Trump genuinely believes, and he said this out loud, that Republicans do better running against progressives than against moderates. He said, we do better against the communists, according to every poll. That's a strategic calculation. He thinks El-Sayed is beatable, and he wants to define him before El-Sayed can define himself. It's the oldest play in American politics. But here's the thing Trump may not be counting on. El-Sayed's response was remarkably composed. On CNN with Caitlin Collins, El-Sayed didn't take the bait. He thanked Trump for calling him a lovely gentleman, said a lot of people think so, and then pivoted right back to Michigan policy, health care, schools, roads. That kind of discipline is exactly what Trump does not want to see from his opponents. So what happens next? Let me tell you what I think we're looking at. In November, Abdul El-Sayed faces former Congressman Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee. Michigan is a purple state. It went for Trump in 2016, for Biden in 2020, for Trump again in 2024. The Senate seat is being vacated by Gary Peters, a Democrat, which means Democrats have to hold it to have any chance of flipping the chamber. The question now is whether Trump's attacks help Rogers or hurt him. And the honest truth is, it could go either way. On one hand, Trump's rhetoric energizes the Republican base. Calling El-Sayed a communist and an anti-Semite gives Republican voters a reason to show up. It simplifies the choice: us versus them, American values versus radicalism. That works with a certain segment of the electorate, and anyone who tells you otherwise isn't being honest. But on the other hand, and this is where it gets complicated, Michigan has one of the largest Arab American and Muslim American populations in the country. Dearborn alone has a massive community that has been politically active for decades. And when Trump stands up and smears a Muslim American nominee with that kind of language, it doesn't just motivate his base, it motivates the other side too. It tells people who might have stayed home that this election is about whether they belong in American democracy at all. And historically, when you make a group of people feel like their participation in the democratic process itself is under attack, they show up, they organize, they vote. Trump may be creating the very energy he's trying to defeat. And that brings me to the bigger picture, the one that keeps me up at night and gives me hope at the same time. Look, I've been in public life for a long time. I've seen a lot of ugly campaigns. I've been the target of plenty of them myself. But what I've learned, what the history of this country teaches you if you're paying attention, is that America has always been strongest when it opens the door wider, not when it tries to slam it shut. When John F. Kennedy ran for president, people said a Catholic couldn't serve. They were wrong. When Barack Obama ran, people said America wasn't ready. They were wrong. And if Abdul El-Sayed wins in November, it won't be because America lowered its standards. It'll be because a kid from Detroit who won a Rhodes Scholarship and earned a medical degree and served his community decided to step into the arena. You don't have to agree with every one of his policy positions to recognize that that story, that specific American story, is something worth protecting. Now, if you do one thing after watching this, one thing, I'd tell you to go read the Bluebill newsletter. I recommend it more than anything else I could point you to right now. 5 minutes, that's all it takes. And it's going to help you understand what this Michigan race actually means for your family, for control of the Senate, for the direction of the country. You deserve to have that. Don't be the person who's always finding out last. Don't be the one at the table just nodding along while everybody else already knows the details. The information is there. Go get it. Because this country needs people who are paying attention, not people who are waiting for someone else to tell them what to think. That's always been the difference. And in times like these, the difference matters more than ever.